Hello and welcome back. Lou, I think it's the second time that you're on my channel. Welcome back.
It is. Thank you so much.
And today we're going to talk about something that you and the team has been building for a while, and that is pretty exciting. And for those that are not for the first time listening to one of my videos, you are on the channel which is focused on CI/CD. I'm thinking about moving a little bit away from that and talking more about the general challenges of modern cloud software development. So if you do not like that, please let me know in the comments. But today we're going to talk about Onas, which is a pretty exciting, I would call it a cloud development IDE. I don't know how you call it, Lou, but I remember last time that we talked about Gitpod and cloud development environments, and we focused a lot on Code Catalyst and the corresponding development environments that we had over there. What are we talking about today? Why is it different to what we talked about like 18 months ago?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Lou, and I work for Onas. I've been here for quite a few years now, and before that I was a software engineer as well for probably about a decade before that as well. So I've been doing this for quite a while. So Onas is a platform, and as you mentioned, we've been around for a while. And what the sort of core of the platform is effectively like automated development environments. So, for humans, you go in, you click a button, all of your packages and dependencies and things like that are installed into a dev environment. You click a button, you're in your IDE. That's sort of Gitpod, which is what Onas was called up until about a month ago. What Onas is effectively is a platform, so it's building on top of that. We've kind of separated them out, so we kind of have three pillars now. One of those is effectively agents, so we have agents built into the platform, first-party agents, so you can effectively delegate tasks into these environments. You have the environments themselves and all of the functionality we talked about last time as well, which you can dig into. And then the final bit is kind of guardrails. So a big aspect for Onas has always been the sort of security aspect as well. So you have these secure, isolated sandboxes. Sort of most of our customer base that we work with are regulated companies that are very security conscious as well. So there's a big sort of security aspect to that as well. But it's really across those two. What we're effectively doing is improving developer productivity, and then now it's really about thinking effectively sort of what is the future of development. If you go to the website now, you'll see that we talk a lot about like what is effectively beyond the IDE, which is interesting because we're a company that, historically, even some of our engineers have built IDEs themselves. We're integrated with the IDE, but what we are sort of thinking about is what is beyond that, like what as developers is sort of the next step of a developer tool. IDEs are still very relevant, but as a platform, what does the future of developer tools look like? And as developers, what does that mean for our roles when we're sort of delegating work to agents, potentially across multiple agents as well? And Onas is really a platform for doing that.
Yeah, and that's what caught my attention. So I was listening to a podcast that I think Christian Weichel, who is, I think, your CTO or something like that.
That's correct. Yeah, CTO.
Yeah, has been giving to the German community, right? And I said, okay, this sounds intriguing, but it was a marketing thing, so I want to hear, is this really true? And I want to see if it actually works, right? So for me, what I'm looking at it today is I've been using a bunch of agentic coding IDEs in the past few months, working on getting them to build something pretty cool. At least that's what I hope. And Onas seems to close the gap on some of the things that I've been seeing are blocking me today. Things like local memory usage. I'm kind of always reaching the amount of memory that I have on my local PC. And then also the idea of having multiple agents work together and collaborate on certain aspects of things, right? I think these are all things that I want to understand how Onas solves that better, right? And how do you integrate this kind of tooling into the SDLC of a larger enterprise? And then from my background on where I am today, right, I still work for FICO. We are a financial services software provider. We're doing an analytic decisioning platform that we provide to our customers, and we are pretty keen on protecting our IP. And I would love to hear how the guardrails that you have in the platform are going to help you with that. I don't know what's going on, but my Descript is constantly warning me about my poor network conditions, so I hope that you can hear me well, Lou. And I would propose let's directly jump into it and let's have a look on how Ona works and how I, as an engineer, can work with Ona. What do you
Yeah,
think?
absolutely. Network wise, I can hear you loud and clear, so it's all good
Perfect.
from my side.
Then let's try to go and see what the hell is Ona, and I'm gonna be asking stupid questions as always, hoping that we as listeners get a lot out of this session.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you see my screen?
I do see your screen.
Wonderful. The obligatory question. Feel free to just drop in with questions as well, Johannes, because people can always go to the website and see a lot of the other videos and other content. So if there are specific questions, I think it's a good place to kind of dig into them.
First, stupidly, this is a desktop app or is it a browser-based tool?
It's both. There is a sort of Chromium desktop wrapper, which actually I use more often. I just so happen to have it open in the browser this time. Uh, Internally, and probably reflects the same with our customers actually. We used to use the desktop app more, but I think with the agent platform, because you're almost jumping to documentation or a preview URL, it seems that even internally, like a lot of our own engineers now use it a lot more back in the browser again, which is an interesting sort of swing. I haven't dug into why that is, but I've just noticed that as of late. But I personally, I don't know. I use the desktop app because I prefer like having it in my sort of menu tab, but it's just a preference thing. Sure.
Cool, sounds good.
So
Then let's get going and
uh,
let's see how the hell does it work. I can see ChatGPT on your screen. Is that like that?
I hope you don't see actual ChatGPT, but it
No,
maybe
no,
looks
no, no.
similar.
I see something that looks similar to ChatGPT, where I can just
Amazing.
get going and chat to Oda. That's what I
Yes,
see.
exactly. So as I mentioned before, so Ona has a platform for like these automated and secure development environments. So this is sort of the homepage of Ona. What I can do if I come in here is I've got a number of different configurations already. Let's take those off. You can take any different project that you're working on, sort of front end, back end, etc. I'll take one of our demos for now. Um, those configurations are typically also configured with some form of compute as well. Like in this case, we have a specific class that's attributed to that with a certain amount of memory and CPU, because that's going to then get its own sort of isolated environment. And if I just take one of these sort of examples, I like the test coverage one because it kind of works for a little bit longer. But if I sort of craft in there sort of my prompt or my task, and then actually then go ahead and fire that off into Owner, what you'll see is effectively on the left hand side here, you get that now launching. That's going to start spinning up its own environment and actually start to work on that task. And then what you can do is through Owner effectively then fire off as many of these. So if you're working on a bug or a feature or a pull request or reviewing someone's code, you can basically then just launch all of those off into parallel. And what we've tried to do
Okay.
here with the sidebar is just make it a bit easier that you can kind of step into each of those and kind of, the agent is sort of flagging to you saying, hey, I'm finished with my, this piece of work. Maybe it needs another, some more context, or it needs a question answering, or maybe it's just entirely done. And, you've got a pull request or something like this.
Okay, so let's pause there for a second, because I think we need to unpack a bunch of things that I personally know
Absolutely.
of, right? So, Ona comes from Gitpod Flex. We talked about that. So I assume that what you're using here is the same technology as before, right? So under the hood, you're going to be firing off EC2 machines that then bring up the agent. They are pre-configured and they execute the tasks that you are kind of giving into them. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
And that gives me the possibility to also be able to host this on my own AWS account in my own premises somehow, right? But you also offer that as a managed service, so I can directly consume that as a user from Ona itself.
Precisely.
Okay, and the possibility to get this hosted into my own AWS account is obviously a good thing because I can keep everything under my own control somehow. What kind of permissions do I need to give Ona to be able to work and access this?
Yeah, so the way that works is whilst that agent is doing its thing.
Yeah, sorry for
Uh,
driving you into that conversation.
no, it's It's a difficult one, right? Because you kind of need to know that to know what the voodoo is. It's like, do you show the voodoo first and then, show the nuts and bolts under the hood, or vice versa? It's a bit chicken or egg. But effectively, what I've just shown you in this case for this demo is as you say, is running on AWS. So in this case, we have like runners. Runners are installed in your AWS account, and like you say, it handles the sort of spinning up and provisioning of the environments themselves. In the case of the AWS runner, that is EC2. EBS is used for the sort of volume and sort of memory persistence of the environment itself. That's like a one-time thing. You run through the setup process, you add a CloudFormation template, which largely is basically just plugging in your network configuration, so sort of subnet and that sort of network information as well for where that runner runs. In an enterprise context, that obviously gets a little bit complicated. Like no enterprise I've ever come in into terms with has a simple network setup, and they're all uniquely different. So you kind of need to plumb
Always.
that into all of your network stuff. But once that's set up and running, that's then done, and then it's effectively from a developer or end user perspective. You're just sort of pressing the button to get a new environment from there. I mean, I think probably the other thing that's worth mentioning as well is obviously those environments also are authenticated with Git. So as a user, you log in, you get the sort of typical GitHubs of OAuth prompt box, do you accept, blah blah blah, and then when you launch
Yeah.
new
Okay.
environments, they are sort of launched with your context of your Git user.
Okay, so that means that all of the environments and runners then get my OAuth credentials kind of built in, so you can then directly retrieve the code base as well. That means when one of these machines comes up, it really comes with everything that is prepared for you as a user. And then it can execute all kind of tasks, and that's what we're going to look at in a few minutes.
Precisely, exactly.
Okay, cool. Let's just add one more follow-up question. How much does Owner today know about me as a user? So what I'm trying to say by that, he knows my OAuth, you know my OAuth credentials, you know the runners, you know the tasks that I want to do. But do you also keep a profile record around Johannes as an individual developer and engineer that you can then use to include that in the additional context that is being created?
That's a really good question. As a first party integration, no. I guess you mean almost like the Chat GPT kind of like memory type of sort of preference.
Yeah, kind of. Let's park that question until we have
Come
seen a
back
little
to
bit
it.
more of the product, and we're gonna go back to that because obviously I have some thoughts that I want to challenge you with. So
Please
let's look
do.
at now what is this agent now doing, right? So we kind of saw, okay, we have an chat kind of type interface to actually create a environment, that's how you call it, right? Which under the hood means you're going to bring up an EC2 instance that then holds the code base, and you can also instruct the agent to do specific things. And I think that's what we see in the UI as well, right?
Yes, exactly. So, what I potentially can do if I close that for a second, just so we focus on the chat, and then we'll come back to the sort of the settings as well. So, I mean, you fired in that prompt. In this case, it's a sort of an example one, but one for looking for a filling in some tests function, and then effectively what you've got is just the agent log under here. So, the agent has the tools for the environment, so it has tools for running commands, accessing the file system. It can execute tests, it can read logs, etc. And then also in that sort of work context, because you're networked into your sort of the work network itself, and then anything that has access to that you've granted access to, whether databases or knowledge bases or anything else, the agent can also access as well. And then what we do is we create a to-do list. The agent creates its own to-do list. Again, that's exposed to the agent through a set of tools. And as you give it new prompts, it sort of reconstructs its to-do list. That's nice because it makes the agent more efficient. It gives you a nice overview. When we didn't have this, I've personally found myself very overwhelmed. You'd come in here, you see this log, the agent's done a bunch of stuff. Like you're scrolling through trying to figure out where you're at, and that's really nice. And then also, we kind of surface this in the sidebar as well, and that's even it's a minor thing, but that's also really nice as well. When you're running different ones of these, you can actually see like how far your agent is kind of progressing through the task.
Okay.
Um, and then yeah, so it's running through that task. In this case, adding the unit tests. It's making changes to the code base, etc. Um, and then in this case,
It's
also
outputting that as well. But
yes,
it still means this is a task list that the agent has created on that machine itself, and this
yes,
is
exactly.
how it's now actually working. There's no direct integration with issue tracking systems like Jira and or GitHub right now?
So there is MCP support, and
Okay.
also, I mean, the GitHub CLI works very, very well. I have that installed for myself as well, so you can use that to sort of fetch and fetch pull requests and issues and things like that as well. Um, which, yes, then also you can kind of build that into your environment configuration to just pre-install that, which is also what I've got in here as well. So I suppose even in this case, I guess I can even ask it.
And you can just interrupt the agent while it's working as well.
Yeah, of course. Sort of interrupt it
Cool.
and stop it at any point.
But at the same time, it also gives you the possibility to directly look at it yourself, right? So
Yeah, so that's
I
one of the more interesting parts for me is you have the agent, you can delegate things to it. There are some other tools on the market that do this. And I think the other side of the spectrum is like the code assistant type of side of the market where it's like you're very human in the loop with the AI itself. What we're effectively doing is almost straddling both worlds because what we allow you then to do is take that environment and then also jump into it, right? So you can, in fact, actually, let me show you here. So we've effectively embedded also VS Code inside the interface. So if you want to sort of see what the changes the agent make, if you want to interact with that, if you want to make sort of small changes in there, you can do that directly from inside the interface, and that's just nice for just kind of keeping track of it. But let's say there are some bigger changes you want to make, you want some more fine control. What you can then do is then use one of the editor integrations. A single click opens up in VS Code. I think actually I've got for this
So
repo VS Code open.
what that means is that now you're gonna add a remote pod that is being opened on the machine, and it directly integrates with that, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a bunch of tooling under the hood that we do for that. For the VS Code ecosystem, there's effectively like a remote SSH extension, which we
Mm-hmm.
install, connects then up to that remote environment. And then I suppose for those that aren't aware of this, like VS Code is very clever because it actually acts almost like in a client server type of way, where
Okay.
on my machine, VS Code is almost acting like a window, but then all of the compute, the source code, the everything else is then running in this case inside of the compute the owner is running.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. That's pretty cool, right? So that means you can directly jump into a real IDE and actually interact with it. You can do that through the browser, as we see. We can see the changes before they are actually committed. Would the agent also commit them on itself without you interacting with it, or what would be the flow of a developer?
Depends on how you prompt it, really. So in this case, obviously it has access to GitHub. So in this case, if I'm okay with it, I can be like, okay, sure, sounds good. Commit and push.
Mhm.
Depending on the type of action, I might ask it to do that ahead of time. You could prompt it to
Okay.
not do that if you wanted to as well. But yeah, so it depends on what you're working on, really. Sometimes you're reviewing stuff, so you're taking something from GitHub. Sometimes you're wanting to sort of commit stuff back. It's very nice for those sort of like even small changes where someone raises something in Slack or whatever, and you just hand it off to owner, and then it just does the full thing end to end, raise the pull request, and then you just kind of go through there. Looks good.
Yeah, that's what
Approve,
Christian was
manage.
talking about at the end, right? So he kind of said he delegates a few tasks to the agents, they work on it, and then they get back with here's an open pull request, and he just approves those, right? That is what he was alluding to. That also means that I can fire off as many tasks as I want, right? So I can fire off as many machines as I can pay, I would guess. Or how does it work?
So, well, I could talk about it in two contexts. For the managed service, there's like a separate sort of pricing model where you're paying for effectively compute units. Compute units
Okay,
are the environment itself, because obviously you're running the virtual machine and the
okay.
tokens. You only get billed for whatever you use, whether that's you have to use the environments, but you don't have to use the tokens. And then in the case of the enterprise one, because that's running in your AWS account, it's running through typically like Bedrock, in which case then you're billed for that within your AWS account. So for any number of EC2s that you spin up, any persistent storage and tokens are probably the big three sort of cost factors.
Okay, so that's pause there. Like the hosted version that Ona offers today allows me to follow a pricing model that is based on usage, or what is it based on?
It's based on, yeah, it's usage based. So
Okay, so no flat fee. That means I'm gonna be billed what I'm kind of using of the system, or what's the pricing model for that hosted option?
Uh, So basically, there is a sort of a price for it varies because if you have a different sized environment and then the token usage, effectively, it's a roll up of both of those. So for any, for however number of the environments you create in a given month and however much token usage you use as well.
Okay, I got it. And then when I host this as an enterprise on my own AWS account, obviously I'm going to be billed for all of the AWS infrastructure that is being used and consumed. And that makes complete sense, right? So I think that's where, what is the management fee that you guys kind of get from a product perspective? Would that be a license fee if there is if you use the enterprise version, or how does that billing model work?
Yeah, sure. The enterprise one is a license fee. So it depends a little bit on the type of customer and the support package and things like that. Um, but yeah, that's how it works currently. It's per seat, effectively.
Proceed. Okay, that makes sense. Cool. Okay, let's dive a little bit into the possibilities to create multiple agents in parallel. So essentially that means that I can work on multiple projects and agents at the same time as an individual. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
And I can fire off as many as I want.
It's as many as you want, and also as many as your organization policy will allow you to. Because
Okay,
obviously we
so where
give
do I define those
companies
policies?
basically in our settings. So we have a bunch of overrides for number of environments you can have, number of concurrent environments at any given time, just to kind of to manage that. We also have sort of like auto archival and things like that, which is useful. Then you're sort of cleaning up the old ones because it's very easy to go a bit crazy with this launching environments and leaving them running. So we give a bit of guardrails there to clean up and sort of
Yeah, of
just
course.
make sure you're
If of course it comes as
managing
a
that.
price. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I think we already looked at the different environments and the agents at the end. So at the end, agents and environments, they just play together, right? So the agent is then interacting with the environment, and it can also execute tasks on that. What kind of type of agent are you supporting over there right now? Is it just one agent, or is it multiple ones? Because everyone seems to be building agents these days. So how does this work for Ona?
Um, this is a good question. So the owner agent that we kind of launch from here, is our own first party agent. So you kind of configure the model. Again, like the sort of enterprise ones, it's usually a private model. So it's usually Bedrock, or maybe Google Vertex as well. Um, but the logic for that is entirely written by us. So we kind of manage that agent, the agent loop, etc. To a degree, most of that logic is like coupled with the environment. The agent almost is worth thinking about it almost like the agent lives in the environment. But obviously, it has access to other owner pieces of metadata and infrastructure and things like that as well. But from a user perspective, it's almost like
There's
thinking
kind of
about
the
it in
central
the
agent that then orchestrates the different coding agents that live on each of the environments. That's what I'm hearing.
it's well, at least right now, it's almost more the inverse. It's almost like each agent lives within a single environment, and then you're the orchestrator for now, if that makes sense.
Okay, that makes sense. But that still means that okay. So isn't that a limitation? So,
Um,
so
it's
one of my challenges in my day-to-day work right now with coding with an agentic AI agent is exactly that, right? That agents don't really talk to each other. They don't really know much about each other, which means that if I'm effectively working on the same code base, they don't interact. That means that they create conflicts. They sometimes produce garbage code because they override each other's files. The only way to work around that is by working on branches somehow, right? And I would assume that that's how your agents work as well. That means when I bring up an environment, a new branch is spin up, and in that new branch, the changes are made that are then pushed. Does it depend on how you prompt the agent?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends because when we talk about like parallel agents, it's interesting that people's brains go off in two ways. Like one way
Okay.
is I have my agent working on different tasks, like truly discrete individual tasks, and that's kind of what we were referring to. And then there's almost this other version of parallelization, which is almost, I suppose, like people trying to performance optimize their agent to a degree. like working on the same task, but maybe in different directories, like doing front end, back end, one writing tests, one writing code, something like that. Like theoretically, you can use Owner in that way. I have not spent a lot of time doing that. Our customers don't really do that. I find that to be more like pushing the edge more than like the sort of pragmatic, sort of real term use. Like
Yeah.
there are like these agent use cases that are fun on Twitter, or on X. I still call it Twitter, but there's sort of these use cases that are fun on X, and then there's like almost like the real world ones. I find this sort of like merge conflict resolving type of multi-agent flow is just a long way off. I haven't seen anyone that's like truly, truly productive doing that, even though you kind of, I suppose you could. And I've been wanting to actually try to push that myself just for fun. Um,
Yeah, so
but
I'm
I
I'm
generally
doing
wouldn't
it
advise it.
actively, which is why I'm asking that question, right? At the end,
How's
I
it
want
going
to
for you?
try.
How do you find it?
I
Challenging or?
think it's challenging, right? So
Yeah.
especially because the models that are being used are not really good, right? So the only way to manually do that right now is to spin up a different branch and create and start a new window of the IDE to interact on that, right? So then, with that way, you can kind of get used to it. You can get it to work, right? But still, that's what I was hoping for Ona to be in the future, like being my central place of where I coordinate the different development activities that need to be done, right? Which is why I'm poking around on that topic a little bit, because what you're telling me is that, and it makes sense. That's a starting point, right? The different environment, the agents don't talk to each other, they don't know anything about each other. That means the moment that the environment is gone, the agent forgets everything that he has learned. Just a very good example is tabs versus spaces. Of course, that would be configured in the environment, but if Lou works on this environment, you might want to get tabs, and if Johannes works on this, he might want to get spaces, right? And essentially, as a user, I don't really want to deal with that. I want the agent to know that about myself, or I want the system to know that about myself. So I'm kind of talking about a highly personalized experience of dealing with agents, right? Where, of course, the user is the orchestrator, but there is something more than helps to orchestrate that for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think with owner and then with the other agents, there are different ways of doing this, right? And like managing that agent memory is challenging. I think one of the biggest challenges with that is when you give it fully to the agent, is then you're giving more and more and more context to the agent, and there's more ambiguity, I suppose. Um, within owner, like we added, slash commands and things like that into owner, which are sort of very popular as sort of adding institutional knowledge into sort of specific slash commands. That helps with that, but of course you're curating that to a degree more than the agent. Maybe in future the agent will maybe make suggestions to this. I start to see that in some of the other agent implementations, which is cool. But to a degree, a lot of the context engineering is done by the agent itself. So I mean, it's down to, I suppose, we support like agents MD and things like that, so you can add in additional context to kind of steer it. But I think that what you sort of highlighting, to be honest, is like one of the biggest general challenges for agents as a whole. Um, for
And
me,
then, yeah,
I was going to
go
say,
ahead. Sorry.
speaking for me personally, like outside of owner, I've been using the sort of PRD type of process like for as long as it's been a thing, effectively. So in my projects, it's interesting because I keep a log. Almost everything I work on then is there's some form of PRD. There's like this history log, etc. But even then, it's still a little bit challenging. I have certain files that define my sort of standards, but most of the time I have to do the work and then remind the agent, can you now go back and just double check against my whatever unit test preferences, sort of other preferences, etc. Like it's very difficult, at least in my case, to try and get it to sort of almost like one shot that over larger
Yeah.
complex changes. So like having these slash commands or like sort of preference files that you can re-reference, I find is useful. But yeah,
Yeah, so some other tools like Hero support steering documents, steering guides to actually
yes,
pre-train the
exactly.
agents or give them some feedback. I assume that you can do that within Ola as well, but it's not a native integration as far as I understood you, right?
Precisely, yes.
And you also said that there is MCP support coming, or there is MCP support for the different agents that helps you to do a lot of things as well, I guess, right?
Yes,
But
exactly.
still, we have a long way to go, right? So I think I'm not gonna no. I'm not gonna think out loud. Let's before we talk more about the future, let's structure a little bit. The projects component on the left hand side is my way of defining which projects I would like to work on, and that's where I also define the GitHub connection or the Git connection in general, right?
Yeah, so I mean, your sort of your choices here is you can start environments from scratch, which is going to give you a just like on your machine a blank space where you can work from. But I suppose for those that aren't familiar with Owner, like projects is almost like a catalog of the different projects you work on. When I say project, a project could be like one source code repository or multiple, and then it's also that plus the combination of effectively like your configuration for the running environment. So in this case, sort of your dev container dependencies. So that's like languages you want to install, packages to install, etc. And then like the sort of the compute of the environment. And that's just really trying to take away all the decisions to have like a setup environment so you don't have any questions. So that's nice because then you can reuse that for the agents. The agent gets everything that a human would in terms of all of the setup and that kind of thing. And that's done through effectively what we call a project, which is really just a way to store those preferences and settings together so that you can effectively
Yeah,
launch
yeah, that
environments
makes
from
sense,
them.
and that's cool, right? So that's the way that I can structure my own work, and I can also structure my work in my enterprise. And then there's a shared model as well where I can actually share projects with other users. I would assume, right? And you stop me if that's correct, if that's wrong.
No, that's correct.
Okay, and okay. That's pretty cool. So now let's talk about the flip coin of all of the agentic AI code generation, the problems that a lot of enterprises have with that. On the one side, I am giving you guys, or I'm giving owner and the agents access to all of my code and potentially also my production environments. I'm giving IP free away to our LLMs, and I think this can be a challenge as well. So, what I would like to talk about is what guardrails do you have today? What possibilities do I have to protect the intellectual property of my organization that I kind of work for? And then, if you have some context on that, if Ona is really generating 70% of your code for Ona itself, is that copyrightable?
So we'll start with the first part. So um, yeah, we've been around for a while. Prior to some of this AI and the agents. So one thing that we've spent a lot of time on is refining that the sort of the model for running the dev environments. And one thing that we found is that the product works really well in sort of high security environments. So the architecture underneath it is built for that. The way that effectively works is like we say, the workload, the dev environments are running inside the customer account, and we don't have any visibility over that. We have some small amounts of telemetry to help us with operating it, but we have no idea what source code, anything sort of sensitive about that. But what's really nice about the source code, then the IP, then is living inside of your account, and then the way the owner and the agents are configured also is that's then routed by your configuration for your LLM. So you actually configure that as a customer. So then twin that with something like Bedrock, and then you have sort of a very strong privacy guarantee. This is something that we get a lot of inbound requests about because there's lots of agent tools out there, but like the ability to almost like centrally make a decision on which LLM you use to kind of keep your sort of your IP and things like that private is something that we then offer. The guardrails is really like a bucket. I mean, guardrails is a marketing term, right? But it's a bucket that refers to all of these different controls that we have. Some of the controls themselves are the isolation of the sandboxes, it's the self-hosting in the network. Some of that relates to the sort of the configuration of the dev environments, the dependencies, the policies that you can apply to it as well. But
Well,
over
what kind of
time,
policies are that? Can we talk a little bit of details around that?
yeah, of course. The policies are mostly around sort of cost management, etc. There aren't so many at this point in time that are security specific, or at least the policies within the product itself. The security layers kind of come in a few different places, like the sort of secrets management and the isolation, etc. But obviously, there's now a lot of investment from our side going into looking at what additional guardrails we can put in place that effectively secure these agents even more. So additional controls around sort of what they can install and which other things that they can access, and how do we flag alerts when agents do things that are anomalous, or things like that. So that's still early stage for us in terms of there is a bit of a sort of a roadmap around
So,
additional
so
sort
the
of
landing page
security.
talks about fine grain policies and
Yes.
and guardrails. What do we have today?
So for the fine grain side of it, I mean, that's referring a lot to the sort of secrets integrations as well.
Yeah.
Like Owner itself is also effectively an identity provider, which means that we can mint JWT tokens and things like that. So a lot of this is actually a little bit difficult to see within the product here. I mean, I can actually show you, but each environment you can give its own access token, and that means that you can also set up and govern what that environment has access to in terms of the fine grained permissions. Um, so that's in reference mostly to that, because then you can give these different projects, these different environments, different permissions to different, let's say, internal databases or data structures. You mentioned even like production before. I would say that that's not. We don't see a lot of our customers touching production. Theoretically, you can. I mean, it's up to you. If you want to give the agent access to deploy or to touch your production configurations, you can do. But usually, that's more internal development resources of some kind, typically.
Okay, cool. So guardrails are right now mainly on usage for owner itself, right? And then creation of or sizing of the environment and stuff like that, right? But right now, guardrails does not mean that I can formulate policies of what type of code the agent is allowed to create at the end, right?
Yeah. So the for the code and the SCM integrations, that's currently tied to the user who launches it. So identity wise,
Okay.
you, Johannes, are still responsible from an identity side for the agents that you launch currently. The agents don't
Okay,
have
makes
their
sense.
own sort of
Makes
form
makes
of
sense.
identity, not yet.
Okay. Another question focused on the enterprise usage of this. What possibilities do I have to define enterprise-wide standards that need to be adopted by all of the teams? So thinking of coding standards, coding styles, security requirements, and stuff like that, I can see owner being able to enforce specific context or steering for all of the agents that are launched for my enterprise. Is that something that you already have or that you're thinking about?
So there is a few different ways I mentioned, through some of these like steering documents, etc. There's not currently a way that you can almost do this in a top-down way. This would be a software you'd be asking teams to adhere to it, or asking them to add things into the repo, etc. But one thing that I will say is one thing that comes up a lot, and I can't say too much on our plans for this, but you can imagine you effectively here have like an orchestration environment for these agents. And at the moment, you're launching them in parallel, yes, but also somewhat coupled to the human itself. I think one area that we're really also exploring now quite a lot is how do we also almost unleash these to maintain those standards. So there's standards baked into what the agent does today. So don't deviate me from the standard. But as you well know, across your estate, you're probably deviated from many standards already everywhere. And not just that, they deviate over time, right? If the CVE comes out or a dependency gets dependencies need bumping, etc. So those types of use cases is also something that we're looking into. You can do this, you can home roll this yourself with the API and do that, but we're looking into ways that to provide that effectively like first party as well, where you can actually run almost like standardization tasks across entire organizations using these sort of primitives as well. But yeah.
Cool. Yeah, this sounds good. This sounds promising at least. Where are you going next? Now with the platform,
We're,
what are the high level roadmap items for the next 2 or 3 months?
It's a good question. There's a few sort of smaller items. I think what I just mentioned about like effectively, we work with a lot of platform teams, so I think these sort of standardization tasks have come up a lot. Like, how do we unleash these across our entire organization? Like, how do we do almost like a staged or a phased migration across the entire infrastructure estate is something that's very interesting to us. And then aside from that, I think a lot of the things that we talked about, about like how do we provide individual steering, and things like that are other items on the roadmap as well. But honestly, I mean, you're living at the bleeding edge. Quite frankly, we've talked about a lot here. Even the functionality we've even just shown is a lot for a lot of the customers that we work with. Um, so even just rolling out what you have here can be sort of a massive unlock for a lot of organizations, especially the ones that are security conscious, where they're sort of just watching everything that's happening on the internet and not allowed to use a lot of these tools for various reasons. So there's a lot of work to be done there as well. But
Yeah,
I
and I think
think,
there's also a bunch of education that needs to be done, right? So we are
yes,
talking here today about this platform, but we're kind of diving from the infrastructure of the platform to the tooling of the platform to the support that we get with AI of the platform and we're talking about SDLC lifecycle and all of that kind of stuff, right? And this is not a marketing session where we kind of tell you how great things are, right? This is more like understanding how it really works. And I think we the listeners need to understand a lot of the context to then be actually able to actually use that, right? And I think maybe we need to do another one where we kind of place owner into the SDLC and how it plays a role in software development, right? Because I think that's what I'm kind of trying to get to understand that as well.
yeah, yes, well, yeah, we'll have to save that one for next time.
Yeah, I think we're running a bit out of time. But before we kind of break apart for today, Lou, Christian said 70% of the owner code is generated by owner. That's, I would say, first of all, that's kind of a lie because owner doesn't generate code. The model generates code. So, which model are you using under the hood? And is the number of 70% being code being built by owner or instrumented by owner? Is that really true for your product today?
Yeah, it is actually true. I will add a caveat to that because that's 75% of the code is written by owner. 60% of the commits are co-authored by owner. What that effectively tells you is the co-authored commits by owner are slightly longer, like they have slightly more lines of code in them. Um, but I mean, the reason that that is so high is also because I guess a lot of engineers, will address feedback comments from pull requests using owner. Some of these like smaller items, which over time sort of adds up. I know there's been some other famous people quoted for these numbers, but like it's true because um, it doesn't mean that that is 75% that hasn't been reviewed, touched, co-authored, tweaked by a human. That's also the case as well. It just means that owner was involved in those 75% of those lines at some point. And obviously what we do is we attribute each commit every time owner commits, we attribute owner to that so we can track that. Um, there was
And
a
how
second
does
part
that?
to your question.
Yeah. The second part to my question was then at the end, is that copyrightable, or can I just use owner if I get hold of the source code because it's AI generated? Can I just use it myself and don't need to pay a license fee? Where are we standing at that from an owner perspective?
I'm not quite sure that I follow, as in like the owner code base itself.
The owner as a product, right? So what I've been discussing and been trying to find out is how much of the code that LLMs generate today is something that I can call my own IP.
Mhm.
And is that something that you're talking about internally, or is that just not interesting? Because you say what our IP is the different integration points that we do, not the code.
Yeah.
How does owner look at that?
I think this conversation seems to have dissipated quite a lot. I'd be interested from your perspective. I mean, like early LLMs were uh, quite bad at almost like spitting out literal direct code blocks, right? Like from GitHub. I don't seem to see that being the case anymore. Um, I mean, it gets a little bit into the weeds, but I don't know if you saw as well, but like Anthropic also did pay out a bunch of book authors recently for the copyright. I think $1 billion actually of their recent
Oh.
funding round, which raises an interesting precedent around sort of copyright because that training data comes from somewhere. Someone is responsible for that training data, and Anthropic has kind of opened Pandora's box here by effectively in that payout. But I'm not a lawyer, so
No, no, it
you
makes
know.
sense. Sorry for driving you into that direction. It's something that I have been thinking about for a while, right? Because if you're building something using LLMs under the hood, right, how much of that is really yours, right? So um, now let's talk about which LLM is being used on
Yes,
through
that was the
Ona right
second
now.
part.
That was the second part, which we missed a little bit earlier, but I drove you somewhere else. So what is the LLM that you guys are using right now?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, Anthropic released a new Sonnet model yesterday, so we'll probably upgrade this as
Okay.
well. But most customers are using basically Sonnet 4, so you can configure that on a per case basis. I think a couple are using 3.5 as well, but mostly 4. And then now the recent one was 4.5.
4.5. They announced
We've jumped,
4.5 recently.
yeah, we've jumped 5 minors somehow, but yeah.
Would you also support to integrate with Gemini or Meta or whatever other providers, or is this really tied to the available models that you have on Bedrock today?
No, it doesn't matter actually. There is an LLM gateway, so it works with Anthropic, it works with Bedrock, it works with Vertex today. That seems to be more than enough right now. But from our perspective, typically it's more of a privacy first concern. So it's more like the customer wanting to control that. We do get cases as well of some customers having custom models. So that's something that I think we will see also in the future is some companies, larger companies, having their own. Maybe this comes back to your previous point about customization, but own custom models that are already pre-trained on their own code base and have done some sort of post training specific to their code base and standards. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an intriguing conversation as well, right? If I have my own code base for my enterprise, how do I kind of feed that information back into my agentic coding assistant platform, whatever you want to call that, right? And I think that's where we're gonna see a lot of movement in the next few months. That's at least what I anticipate over there, right? In addition to that, I think there's gonna be a lot more need to implement additional guardrails and things like 2 years ago or 3 years ago we talked about, not you and I, but in general we talked about shifting left all of the security things, right? And that was kind of one of the things that people talked about a lot, right? And I think that's what these agentic coding supporters can help us do as well, right? Okay, we're reaching the end. I'm gonna add one or two challenging thoughts of what I think that we might want to get from an agentic coding platform in the future. And I think I already alluded to that. I'm always disappointed if an agent forgets what I told him to do, right? Thinks of if I tell the agent 5 times to not use a specific CDK construct, and I need to do that every time that I interact with the agent because the agent forgets everything that I've taught him and taught him, that I taught him, sorry for my bad English, right? I think that's not really helpful. What Johannes dreams of is the possibility to, at the end, have something like a system, something like a platform that grows with my own knowledge. Think of this. You start as a, let's call it, lead engineer in an organization. You usually work with one or two engineer ones. You train them up, and if everything is successful, you grow together as a team, and that makes you happy, right? Because you're kind of leveling up and you're also able to contribute more. What if we would be able to have a platform that does the same thing, right? Which levels up with you, with your knowledge and with the experiences that you have. And this is where I don't know, that's what I'm thinking of, and that's what I'm dreaming of as a software developer next level, right? To be able to expand my brain with these agents, but still help them grow throughout the year. Louis, that's something that you're thinking of from an owner perspective, or is this something that you're thinking of from a Lou perspective?
I'm always thinking about it from both. I think, like you, I'm spending a lot of time with the agents myself and trying to get them to kind of almost like adhere to some of my own preferences. I think the one of the most challenging things actually though is the judgment. I think we'll get to the point where it can understand, a lot of the smaller things, syntaxes. I like my unit tests in this structure. I like table-based unit tests, etc. I think the really hard part is teaching it when to cut corners. I think that's the bit that I also, yeah, like that bit remains to be seen. Like, how do you teach the agent like effective judgment? Because there are situations probably where you're like, you know what, I would actually break my own rule, and I think that's where it gets really difficult to the to the things we mentioned before, because you can have all these examples, but if you follow every example, there are exceptions to the rule, and I think those exceptions to the rule are actually the really hard part as well. But yeah, it's something that we are thinking about, but I think it's also something that's a little bit also a little bit more advanced. I think first we need to get to this point where effectively like engineers are sort of agent proficient, and companies have these tools available to them. And then I think we're going to see a bit of an ecosystem off the back of it. We have the LLM integrations. I would not be surprised if we have almost like memory type integrations where some of these like database companies have specific kind of like memory semantics for learning, and that's how you configure it. Whether that's built into like our type of platform, first party or a third party, I'm not quite sure. If I was to bet, I would actually bet that this eventually becomes like a third party thing, though. I can almost imagine that being an entire tool chain to do this type of LLM memory.
I think I agree. Still, I'm trying to challenge whatever we are doing in industry, right? Because I think that LLMs today are good. They help. They write cool code, but there's still things that they lack at, right? And this would be a feature that, for me at least, would be very helpful. Yeah, I think, as you said, there is a lot of movement in the market. I wish you and the rest of the owner team success with what you guys are doing. I think you're on the run for a lot of very cool things. And as you said earlier, we're talking bleeding edge here, which kind of translates to owner as also bleeding edge, I would say. And I think that's pretty cool for you. Eager to see what you do next. Lou, any final words? Where can people find more about you? I think I'm gonna definitely link to owner, but what are you up for? Will I see you in Vegas? What's going on?
You will see me in Vegas. You can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter, or X. That one. Gitpod owner is challenging Twitter X as well. I never get that one right either. But yes, and then with this one, with the owner one, I mean, we talked about a lot today, but there's a hosted and free one. I'd say go and try it, because it's fun. Try the parallelism, see if it works for you. If it doesn't, let us know why. And yeah, just like try and break it, push it to the limit, and see what happens.
Cool. Thank you so much. I think this was an amazing overview, Lou. Thank you. Thanks a lot for the time that we spent on this. And yeah, eager to see how this develops. And maybe you can come back on in a while and tell us what you've done to address some of the questions that I've asked today.
Amazing. All right. Bye-bye. Thank you so much, Johannes. Speak soon.